This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we are live on our Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook channels. We're happy to introduce today Oyku Dogan, and we're glad to have her on the podcast for the first time. And this is a real treat. Like, you're actually in Italy, right?
Yes, I'm in Italy. Hi, I'm so glad to be here, and thanks for having me.
So we're gonna actually show a video or like a lyric video that you did to kind of what we like to do on this podcast, because we've been podcasting since 2018. We originally were just like on Spotify and Apple on an audio only, and then we've switched to this new video mode. And one of the cool things about the video podcast is we can actually introduce people to your music. And so at the beginning of every episode, we like to introduce a band's YouTube video or their lyric video. So before we start talking about behind the music, we actually show what you're about. So we're queuing that up right now. We have a song that you wrote called Moontide Song, and we're going to get into this, and we'll put you on mute, and then we'll talk back after the video. We'll get into the questions we kind of present you. But yeah, this is going to be Moontide Song, and I'm going to cue it up now. It's ready to go.
There's no sound, there's no one. An hour ago, he was strumming his guitar around the fire, but they're all gone. The last sparks are the only leftovers, a flicker. But I am here, standing on the cold sand. The only sound is the waves, and the winter whistling. Bottles of beer, and I wish you were here. The stars are sparkling, so are the seashells. The moon gravitates me to you. I am thirsty for you. Palm trees are my hair, and the wind is always there. I am dancing for you. One step back, one to you. You and I like the moontide, and I love it when at night it's quiet around. It's quiet around. You and I like the moontide, and I love it when at night no one's talking, I am singing. The harmony of silence in my head as a choir. Starry sky, night blue high. I'll finally sit down. Should I move on? But I am here, laying on the cold sand, feeling on my fingertips the summer night we had. Bottles of beer, and I wish you were here. The stars are sparkling, so are the seashells. The moon gravitates me to you. I am thirsty for you. Palm trees are my hair, and the wind is always there. I am dancing for you. One step back, one to you. You and I like the moontide, and I love it when at night it's quiet around. It's quiet around. You and I like the moontide, and I love it when at night it's quiet around. It's quiet around. You and I like the moontide, and I love it when at the night.
So that is Oyku Dogan and Moontide song, and we are coming back to the full view. So here we go. We're back, and so yeah, you can hear me, right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, that's always a trick to make sure I do it right. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think I like that video because it's a lyric video, but then you got the neon kind of sign flashing, which is kind of cool.
Thanks.
That kind of I've never seen that before, so that's kind of cool. It's like, oh, I want to use that.
Thank you.
But yeah, I like the feel of that song. So it sounds like you're using like an electric piano. Is that what you're
Yeah.
doing? What type of
Yeah.
piano did you use?
So I used really so many electronic sounds for this
Remember?
song. No, like the exact types, I don't remember. There are several pianos actually, but
Yeah.
I was aiming to create a really mysterious track,
Yeah.
like the moon, that atmosphere, let's say. So I chose some electronic sounds and electronic pianos, but I always try to put one acoustic piano as well. Sometimes it's really hidden, but it's always there because
it might be like a shadow track. Because that's the main one sound kind of like a Rhodes, but I don't know. But or it could be Yamaha, it could be Roland's. They all can replicate that stuff. Because like most of these, I got my keyboard, so like most of my Rolands and the Yamaha can replicate a Rhodes, or they can replicate, any of the old, any old instrument, like a Hammond B3 or something. But yeah, I mean, I think it's cool to have somebody that's a pianist or a keyboardist. Today I think I'm in that zone. That's what I do. But it's cool to hear a singer and a songwriter and somebody who plays like organic instruments, even though you have the electronic stuff going on. Because this seems to be the age of like music in a box.
Yeah.
And it's cool to have someone that still kind of believes in, maybe it's not old school, but it's like, that's what I grew up on, or like the traditional singer-songwriters. But we'll
Like
get into
real
the
instruments. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, because I'm a big fan. I mean, before I became a musician, I'm a big fan of music, and I listen to like pretty much everything,
Yeah.
and some people say, oh, the Ghost, does that mean they're just doing techno? And like, no, I listen to, Nashville. I mean, I listen to Johnny Cash. Yeah. I listen to
Yeah.
bluegrass. I listen to hip hop. I listen to jazz. I listen to fusion, hard rock, heavy metal, death metal, punk, everything. And so it's just, I just love music. And I just
Same
think
here, actually. Yeah. I
yeah,
also listen to so many different genres. I try to also learn from all of them. And I don't think there should be so many walls in between different styles.
yeah.
So, yeah.
That's what I mean. My indie label was called Expansive Sound,
Yeah.
because my idea is like, okay, if I want to do some kind of, Waylon Jennings, Johnny Cash inspired country vibe, but then mix it with a little like Coltrane, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with
Nothing.
like a little Hendrix or something, or taking some like beat poetry and doing hip hop and mixing it with like heavy metal or punk? It's like there shouldn't be lines, that are so hard. Like if you think about EDM, you got people it's like, well, you got to have the drop here, you got to have the beat like this, and then everybody's doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, why can't you have EDM that kind of breaks into some kind of fusion? Why not? Well, they won't like it. It's like, well, I think you got to experiment. I think that's the whole thing.
I
But let me,
totally agree. Yeah. That's what I also try to do always. So I couldn't agree more.
so when did you first get into music? We'll start with the questions. Like, what age did you get into it?
Honestly, when I was very little, I was 5 when I started with piano lessons because we had an old piano, my grandma's piano at our house. And especially my mom, she discovered that I was, playing the melodies that I was hearing from the
You can
radio.
so you can play by ear. She could pick up that you
Yeah,
could do it.
I was
That's
very
that's
little, and she noticed that, and my parents said, we can try, to get some piano lessons. Let's see how it goes. And it went well. Here I am. Yeah.
yeah.
My whole life. So I've been doing music, but it started when I was 5 with piano. And then when I was 6, I was already composing my first pieces on the piano. And
Wow.
then, um, with children choirs, so many different things, composition, and and then when I was 15, writing my first songs, because before they were all instrumental, and
Mhm.
then I started writing lyrics as well. So when I was 19, I came to Italy because I was born in Turkey, Izmir,
Mhm.
and I came to Italy to study music. I majored in jazz piano. I majored also in music performance, vocal, and I studied also composition. So I have 3 different worlds: classical, jazz, and modern, let's say.
Well, it's good.
And
Good to have all that because it's interesting because you started to compose like mostly instrumentals. You said when you were like 5 or 6, right?
yeah,
So when
with
did you
piano, yeah.
yeah, when did you find that you actually, because a lot of people realize is like the voice is an instrument. And so you like you could look, I've always been like, I started on winds, I started on clarinets and saxophones.
Oh,
And then I found that they're great instruments, but they're hard to write on. So I,
mm-hmm.
I went to, I went to, I was trying to get into guitar, but I couldn't do it. My brother could do
Mm-hmm.
it. And then I
Yeah,
got into keyboards because like, oh, if I learn keyboards, I learn piano, I can write. I can write the
yeah,
whole song. And then as I said, well, that's I already know how to do the winds. So then I
uh-huh,
like, had ideas of melodies and stuff from the winds. And then like once I had the chords, I was like, oh, I can do something. But
yeah.
it's interesting. Like, when do you find that you actually have a voice? I never felt good about my voice until I like my mid 30s.
Oh,
But you must have found your voice a lot earlier than that because you started, becoming the singer songwriter. So, at what age did you
yeah.
actually incorporate vocals and lyrics into your composition?
I always loved singing so much. I was always constantly singing, also when I was little. So when I was little, I started going to a children's choir. We were singing different things from classical music, but also some musical, some also modern things. I would sing in the car, everywhere. I would constantly sing, always. But I started maybe taking it more seriously, um, as I started also writing songs.
Mhm.
So I actually started writing songs with the guitar because I started playing acoustic guitar,
That's a good
and
writing instrument.
um, it was great, yeah, to play the chords and create a song and things like that. So then I started noticing how much I love it, writing and singing and creating, and yeah. And then I started learning about producing, because almost always I create my own tracks. I produce also the beats and everything.
That's
So I
awesome.
started learning also those things. The software's a different world,
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah.
Let me step back a little bit because one thing I like about writing instruments, right? Like I like piano, I like guitar,
Hmm.
is because sometimes I'll just sit at my Roland or one of my Moogs and then bring my mic over and then I have these hardware recorders. I don't use a DAW, I kind of use hardware recorders. I'm kind of old
Hmm.
school. But I find it's like I like to like just they do stream of consciousness and just play chords and then kind of, even whether I scat or I have a lyric idea, I just kind of work it out while I'm playing, right?
Yeah.
And I find that that is very satisfying as a songwriter. That sometimes like I could sit and try to just concentrate on the chord arrangement,
Hmm.
but if I actually incorporate my vocal
Yeah.
in when I'm playing, it causes me to write it in a different way because I'm actually trying to fit the voice into the chords. So do you
Hmm.
find that you like to write that way, or you find other ways? Because you've been trained on how to do theory, but what do you actually like to do?
Yeah, exactly. For example, I learned how to do things, but then I started doing things the way I loved doing them. So I also have two ways, I think. The first way is, yeah, sitting in front of the piano, starting with some chords or melodies, and creating first the harmony and everything, and then writing the lyrics over it. Sometimes I just write the lyrics and I start creating the melody. So I like both ways, and I honestly don't know it like on what it depends because it just
Yeah,
goes natural that way.
yeah,
And but that's why I also started, getting interested in jazz, I think, because I always played classical piano before, but with jazz I had the freedom to
yeah,
create in that
yeah.
moment with the
It's more
improvisation.
yeah, the
Yeah.
improvisational nature of jazz. Like one of my jazz. I mean, I love Brubeck. I'm a big fan of the American bebop band
Mhm.
Sun Ra. And Sun Ra is kind of really getting more recognition. They're kind of known for their famous thing like "Space is the Place." But prior
Mhm.
to that, they did this thing called Jazz and Silhouette in the '50s, which is like a
Mhm.
bebop form of jazz, like a masterpiece. It's full of really good horns. It's totally representative of that zone. And being somebody
Yeah.
who plays clarinet, and sax, I was like, I'm very enthralled with jazz because
Yeah.
I like the fact that you can do like bebop or you can get into fusion and you can even get into this Afro jazz and you can kind of go off and get
Yeah.
really dissonant and then come back to a core theme. And I love the themes, but I like the freedom that the band can go off and solo or go in really weird directions and come back. And
Yeah.
it's kinda like, you think about like the Grateful Dead or the Allman Brothers or Cream or any like really kind of progressive kind of jam band
Mhm.
does some jazz type of things. Rock bands, when they get really good, tend to borrow from jazz.
Yeah, it's
You
true. Yeah.
you get a band like Steely Dan that's totally like jazz. But, but you get, like the Allman Brothers are kinda a mix of like fusion and country and things like that. And I was always like I used to go see the Allman Brothers, like, live. I would go because 'cause I'm a child of the '70s, I'm in my 50s. And so
Mhm.
I would go see them, and when the Dead were still playing, I go see them. And I did like that kind of freedom that it felt like they were doing stream of consciousness. You know,
Yeah.
they would just go off and do new songs. Like, if you go to see them, they would just come up with new ideas. I had their whole catalog, and then I would hear something like, "I never heard that before." And
Yeah.
I always liked that. I always thought that that was, kind of the nature and the fun of being a musician, is that, you could go out for a crowd and you could create something new right there, and that to me is, like, total freedom. But let me
It's
think,
true. Yeah.
go back to kind of like your like, you started to get into jazz. Is that kinda what you liked about it? That you can at least when you perform it live, it's like there's a lot of freedom to kinda go wherever you wanna go based on what you feel at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. It's like you lose your in that moment you lose yourself, you lose time and space,
Mhm.
and you're just in that music zone in
Yeah,
another dimension, let's say. So yeah, I really love it. I
yeah,
have the same feeling also with writing songs or composing, creating, but maybe with jazz when you're performing, there's also more adrenaline, so it's a different kind of feeling. They're
yeah.
both amazing, but it's different.
I
Yeah.
think it's like jazz, like, if you get into, like a rock, like a Hendrix, I love Jimi Hendrix because Hendrix
Mhm.
was a rock star that went into very experimental jazz-like forms, right?
Mhm.
And it made that like, that's rock now, right? Because rock until that time, solos didn't go like 10 minutes, you know? You didn't
Yeah.
do that. You didn't go and do all these interesting chords changes. Like, people talk about Beatle chords, but think about, like, Hendrixian chords. They're very what I think about Hendrix as a keyboard player, he's like one of the first kind of progressive people, because you listen to Electric Ladyland, the chord choices and the effects that he has on that record are things that like Genesis and Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer did with their keyboards. He
Yeah.
did on guitar. And so he had these very expansive ideas. And I was like, wow, it's like that's kind of like where I want to go. Like if I can take Hendrixian ideas, take Sun Ra ideas, and then have like a punk aesthetic. So I can
Yeah.
come at it like the Clash and have that kind of raw power, or like a Kurt Cobain. Because I
Mhm.
think in rock, like what's cool in rock is when you get somebody like a Kurt Cobain
Yeah.
who kind of has this poet kind of ability, but he's got this honesty and he's kind of got this raw power. It
Yeah.
kind of reminds me of Neil Young and Crazy Horse. Because Neil
Uh-huh.
Young can do very beautiful stuff with Crosby, Stills, and Nash. He can make his voice very beautiful. But then he can get really punk. He was like one of the first punks next to the Who. Because him and Crazy Horse, they can go out and they did stuff that was punk before punk. And it
Yeah.
is kind of like that raw power that you can bring.
Mhm.
And I think it just is a way to express yourself. I mean, it's cool to do beautiful chords and the beautiful arrangements, but sometimes
Yeah.
dissonance and noise and loudness is necessary to kind of do if you're trying to make a statement in some
Yeah,
way.
it's all about the balance, let's say,
Yeah.
between two things. Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's interesting because you're doing this pop music that's jazz influenced, kind of like Steely Dan, kind of like in 1970s, in the 70s and the 80s, you had a lot of people that do what you're doing.
Mhm.
Um, but it's like today it's harder to. I mean, people are doing everything today, so you can say
Yeah.
well, every genre that's ever been, you can pretty much find somebody doing it. But
Mhm.
but it's like you're making a choice to do like classic singer-songwriting with more of a jazz influence.
Yeah, I like mixing up different things, but I also gotta say that especially recently, I've become even more experimental and bold.
Mhm.
So I think it will be possible to, for people to hear it in my next releases. But
Oh, cool.
yeah, I've noticed this
I
thing.
like that.
Yeah. I've been, feeling more free, like I mean, without caring
Mhm.
too much about like getting stuck in one style or
But do you worry like
whatever
when
I
you
love, yeah, whatever I feel in that moment. I started creating with that mood and it's kind of changed things. Before, maybe I was saying like this is the period of, I don't know, let's say I've been hearing so many acoustic pop songs, so let me try to create one. I was more, following also the trends.
trans okay.
Now, yeah, I love, I listen to everything and I try to, understand what everyone's doing in this period and everything. But then I only take what I really love and try to apply it. So I think I've been feeling more free, especially in the past year. Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting because like one thing I think a lot of musicians have is like the pressure from their fan base. Like if you think
Mhm.
about it, like if you come out as a certain type of singer, right? Or a certain type
Yeah.
of band, right? You come out and you're like, okay, I'm a power pop band. And
Yeah.
you have this power pop, and then suddenly you switch to like ska, or you switch to like, oh, I'm gonna do like hip hop. And you
Yeah.
bring in all these people to do features. Like your core audience might be like, I don't like that. So the problem is
Exactly.
the thing is as a musician is like, okay, are you old enough to lose some of your core to get a different audience because you feel like changing? You get artists that didn't really care, like a guy like Prince. I mean, Prince, super big, but he really didn't care if
Mhm.
his core fans only want to hear 1999 and Purple Rain. He would go off and do jazz. He'd
Yeah.
go off and do rock. He'd go off and do experimental things, and whether
Mhm.
people came with him or not, and
Yeah.
if those people only wanna hear Purple Rain, it's like, "It's fine, they only wanna hear Purple Rain," but he would go off and do something else.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan, I have his whole catalog, and his catalog is so varied, you know, that
Yeah.
he just it is like, for a popular musician, it was he had the boldness to say, "I really am gonna go where I wanna go."
Yeah.
Uh,
Exactly.
And I've always been like, yeah, that's the way I want to do it. It's like, why wouldn't I want to do that?
Yeah.
Not that you could be like him. I mean, but the thing is, like, he did pay a price for it, because Purple Rain's like 8 million. He went and did Around the World in a Day was like 1 million, 2 million. Could he win?
Hmm.
Totally different than Purple Rain. He could have done another Purple Rain. He didn't. He did like a psychedelic album,
Yeah.
and everybody's like, "What's this?" And he just didn't care. He kind of just would bounce from like Bowie. Bowie would do something
Yeah,
really big,
exactly.
like a Ziggy Stardust. Then he'd do like a Thin White Duke. So he did like Ziggy Stardust, and then he go and did this thing where he's singing with, he's doing like soul. He's singing with, the soul. He's doing like the Young Americans, and
Yeah.
it has nothing to do with Ziggy, right? And so
He
he
had
was doing
alter egos, different styles. Yeah.
yeah, and he would get, I mean, Ziggy was really big, and when Young Americans did okay, but he had periods where he would do stuff like the Brian Eno stuff. They
Hmm.
did, like Fame and Berlin, all that stuff he did there, and some of that stuff was kind of, the fans they were like, I don't know, it's too experimental, but
Yeah.
but it's like he didn't really care either. It's like if he felt like getting into craft work, Brian Eno, really experimental stuff, he'd go there,
Yeah, exactly.
and that's
Maybe
kind
he
of
would gain some new fans as well by changing styles. Maybe people who were calling him more pop and people that are against pop, let's say, there are so many.
yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
they started liking him more with the experimental stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
I did. But it's like I always like it when a band is willing to go and like dump part of their audience to do something that is gonna pick
Hmm.
them off. And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, I like that kind of punk attitude,
Uh-huh.
like the Ramones or something. um, so like who are your influences and reference points? Man, I can hear and I can name check some. I'm gonna ask you who were you inspired by, and who are some of the reference points like that people could pick up in your music?
This is always a really difficult question because I listen to so many different artists
Maybe
and
I can
that are so different,
maybe top 5, top 10.
top five. Like, for example, I like alternative bands like Coldplay, Travis, Keen, British bands
Mhm.
but they use piano, some really sweet melodies, and some little electronic elements, let's say, and a really sweet voice. For example, that is something that I like usually. And then I also, um, let's say, for example, especially for my first album, I also like progressive rock, so I've been using even though it's a pop album, I've been using some transitions that are unexpected, intros, outros that are really long.
Oh, like
And
I
for example, yeah, there are some elements from that part. Um, I also like, for example, Amy Winehouse a lot
oh,
because
awesome. She's
yeah,
she would be
her
incredible.
voice is amazing, and the way she sings is really particular and really beautiful. So also changing how to change your voice sometimes according to songs, and sometimes singing in a really soft way. Sometimes doing so many runs and things like that. So maybe some elements from her. And from jazz, I like playing, even though, he's not all about piano, for example, Charles Mingus, because
Oh yeah,
he's
Mingus.
really crazy. And
Yeah,
maybe
like
there are some passages that almost sound like classical music because it's really, with classical harmonies and things like that. But then there comes a really unexpected parts, super experimental, super improvised with so many
yeah.
unexpected sounds, let's say, and notes. I
Mhm.
also like those kinds of surprises. So
Yeah, it
yeah,
sounds
I can
like
say
you're very much like in this kind of expansive zone. in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like the idea, not to put you in my area, but I think what I tried to do with expansive is just to say I don't want to get pinned down, right? So if you say
Yeah,
expansive, it means like everything, right? And have had
exactly.
some bands say, "Hey, can I use that too?" I said, "Well, I don't own it, you know." It's an idea. It's an idea about like, because like
Yeah,
it's like music like nobody really own. I mean, if you go back, like all the blues goes back to like Lead Belly, Robert Johnson, all the
yeah.
great guys like there were the White Stripes, you know, and Led Zeppelin. They're
Mhm.
kind of taking Robert Johnson, they're taking, you know, Lead Belly, they're taking all these great old blues guys
Yeah,
and reimagining it. So everything gets kind of reimagined, you know, take a little bit of Chopin or Beethoven, you take a little bit of this, take a little bit of that. Everything's kind of like how you get the feel of it. Like if I go listen to Keith Emerson and I'm on a Moog, people can say, well, that's an Emerson inspired run on a Moog because
yeah.
Keith Emerson is known for doing it a certain way, right?
Mhm.
So then Prince is known for doing his kind of Minneapolis style funk arrangements, which
Mhm.
kind of was based on Funkadelic and James Brown arrangements.
Yeah,
The brilliance about Prince is he took funk, which used to go like 10, 15 minutes,
yeah.
and take that 10, 15-minute type of idea and drop it down to 3 minutes. To take the key elements and then get the Minneapolis sound is basically like it's taking funk and then, you know, actually clipping it down and
Uh-huh.
making it more accessible
Yeah,
and a more and so it seems like it's new, but it's not exactly new. And I think that's like the brilliance of like when you take, you know, you're taking existing forms and just making them yours.
exactly. It's like finding your real voice as an artist.
Yeah,
And yeah.
yeah, I think that's how you pick it up. It's like I can't like I've been people have told me like, "Oh, you went and did a show and you pulled out like a Coltrane line." And I didn't even know I did it. It was like in my head, you
Yeah.
know? Because like I think when you're a musician, things just like if you're just playing, sometimes you might pull in like, you know, how much is that doggy in a window? And you might throw that into something, right? You know, like you could just be playing and you want to you just, you know, you're just playing around and you just throw something in.
Uh-huh.
'Cause it's kinda at the in your subconscious or something, and you just do it. And you people say, "Why'd you do that?" "Well, I don't know. I
I
just
was
did it."
inspired.
You know? I think it's like all of these reference points as a musician, you have this kind of muscle memory, you got this song memory,
Yeah.
you got this history of all these structures, you know about the Beatle chords, you know about Elton John, how he did stuff, and Billy Joel, how he did stuff. So
Yeah.
you might be listening to, you know, Ben Folds, and you might be listening to Elton John, you might be listening to any of the great piano players, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, maybe I'm gonna try something like that,
Mhm.
and maybe I'll incorporate it because that's the kinda like you know, I like where they were coming from." And you
Yeah.
just I think music is like that. I mean, today, people just are more exact. They'll go and actually grab the exact line and sample it.
Yeah. There are
I
so many samples, especially recently. Yeah.
I think it's more interesting when you actually interpret it on an instrument. Because
Mhm.
when you interpret something on an instrument, if I then it never is gonna match the human behavior. Like, you're gonna come at it the way you come at it. But
Mhm.
you know, samples to me, what I like to do with samples, I like to run them through, like, Euro and rip them up.
Yeah.
I have tools on my Euro rack where I can, like, take something and, like, implode it and explode it and rip it up
Mhm.
and time warp it. And my core thing is I don't wanna sound like Ice Ice Baby. You
Yeah.
know, I don't wanna take a Queen Bowie song and make it Ice Ice Baby. I wanna take a sample and make it so you can't recognize where I got it.
It's cool. Yeah.
And then I don't get hit because I actually turned it into something new.
Yeah.
I think that to me is like,
In a subtle way. Yeah.
yeah, it's the core, like how you can use samples in a very creative way. If you think about like Public Enemy and the Bomb Squad or a band like
Mhm.
Neo Soul, their use of samples is like brilliant. You know, they would layer them in such a way it's hard to figure out where the original one came from. You know, and that's the actual real experimental composition.
Yeah.
Like I can dig hip hop when they go like that. And then
Yeah.
maybe they do like a live track over all these reference tracks, and then it becomes like, okay, you're not doing like Ice Ice Baby. You're doing that's my big bad example. But yeah, I just think they
Ah,
like you can use modern technology in cool ways, and so I'm not opposed to people doing that. I just think they need to kind of have their A game when they do it.
for example, I forgot to say I also love hip hop a lot, and I also love Eminem so much. And I think he's a really great example of also using samples because he takes maybe the sweetest melody of any song or even classical music, and then he puts a really strong beat, hip hop beat, really strong drums and everything, and he raps over it. But let's say the chorus of the song is also unexpected. Sometimes he, invites other artists, maybe a
Yeah,
famous singer, maybe even not so famous. So he combines different things. I've always been inspired by his music as well. So
yeah, I
no.
think some of the great hip hop people, what's cool about it, hip hop is kind of a very lyric, um, kind of like a poetic form because like
Mm-hmm.
you hip hop reminds me of like Dylan. Like if you look at some of the great hip hop artists, like hip hop songs are so dense with lyrics compared to a pop song. If you
Mm-hmm.
check a pop song, it's kind of like William Blake. It's very, very simple structure.
Mm-hmm.
If you get into rap songs, can be as complicated as Dylan or like Neil Young songs, or they're very verbose. They got a lot of layers, a lot to them. It's like in a film or a short story. It's kind of like you're getting
Yeah.
into literature. You're getting into like very deep poetry, and I think that that's really cool for music. And what I would like is I
Yeah.
would like rock music and other forms to take the depth of the lyricism in hip hop and bring
Mm-hmm.
that back into rock. Because there was a period in the 70s and the 60s, you listen to bands like Peter Gabriel, the
Yeah.
lyrical content of Genesis
Mm-hmm.
is like incredible. The Ray
Yeah.
Davies from the Kinks. His lyrical content in the Kinks albums are like unbelievable. Like Pete Townsend on the Who, Pink Floyd. Like you had
Yeah.
like serious writing in rock. And today you don't have that level as much. You have some bands that maybe can reach that, um, but not as many. And it just seems like the hip hop is like taking over in that way, but it doesn't have to. I would hope that other forms could take some of those ideas.
Yeah, also because people don't have the patience to listen to deep things. For example, in hip hop, but also in progressive rock, there are also so many references, hidden meanings, so many things to discover, and
Mhm.
they require a lot of time. But right now, people are just, they want to listen to a song and without thinking about the meaning. Sometimes there is no meaning at all.
Yeah, it's
And
kind of
then,
like non
yeah.
kind of like if you think about like there was a period where we had songs in rock like Wooly Bully.
Mm,
Like what does that mean? Right? I just want to hit the drum all day. You have some kind of like silly rock songs, right? That
uh-huh.
were very simplistic and people are like, oh, that's fun. And I understand that we're kind of in an age where maybe things are so serious with the
Yeah,
world that people want that like, how much is that doggy in the window kind of thing? They want something simple. And it seems like we're
yeah,
in this age of if you check Spotify playlist, all the songs are like 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, 1 minute, 70 seconds. Like
exactly. Yeah.
very short. And it reminds me of the 50s. If you think
Mm-hmm.
about in the 50s, you had like bubblegum, you had but then again, the 50s songs are a little tighter. But in terms of they get tons of violins and all kinds of real cool stuff. But but
Mm-hmm.
but the lyrical content is kind of like a little bit controlled because of the kind of like the censorship of the day. People didn't go that far, and
Mm-hmm.
it's today we might have like we have an opposite problem. We have people being a little vulgar, getting really into things, but it's kind of still kind of nonsensical, and
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of not deep. It's not like nobody's doing songs in the key of life. Nobody's doing like doing like tapestry. Nobody's doing like these really deep. singer-songwriter statements.
Yeah.
Even like Neil Young, "4 Dead in Ohio," who's doing that? Who's coming out and doing something like a Dylan "Tangled Up in Blue," or
Yeah,
Andy.
that's why the songs are, they only last for a few months, let's say, not years anymore. So in a few even weeks sometimes, people move on to the next hit, and then nothing remains anymore, Yeah.
Kind of like junk food music. But you like it, and you go looking for their french fries, you go looking for it because it's satisfying, right? But
Yeah.
it's not like having that, that the 5-star meal. Like,
Hmm.
you go to the fancy restaurant, you have the real, like, dinner, right?
Yeah, you don't remember it years after. Yeah.
Yeah, you go back, you listen to Pink Floyd, The Wall, you're always gonna listen to that, right? You're always gonna listen to Wish You Were Here.
Hmm.
Those songs, they go listen to Who's the Tommy? Tommy's a rock opera. It's
Yeah.
designed that you have to listen to it all the way through. You know, I mean, you could listen to Pinball Wizard by itself, but really, you should listen to the whole record. And that's
Yeah.
kind of like where I do rock operas. I write rock operas, whether or not anybody listens to them is, but I write them because that's kind of where my head's at. And
Uh-huh.
I do records still. I do a lot of singles, but I do ideas, and people are into Ghost. They usually will check out my full statement, which is my album. Um,
Hmm.
and that's not the way the world is. So I'm kind of like, but I don't care. That's what I like to do. So when it comes to what your work, do you like to present it as like an EP or an album, or are you kind of like being brought into what you have to do singles, so you're gonna do singles, or do you write more like for an album? Or you write singles because that's the way the world is now?
Yeah. I've released 2 albums so far, but actually, I would like to release more albums. I also have, especially recently, have been really inspired. So I have so many new songs.
Hmm.
But I also love releasing singles because it depends. For example, if in that period I have more songs that are about the same, I don't know, that give me the same kind of themes, emotions, then I get inspired for an album. But if it's a faster period, then singles represent that, I don't know, me even more. Because, for example, June might be like that, but already September is in a different mood. So they kind of represent also my life, how it's going or where I'm at, and also the songs that I write, since I'm also trying different kinds of styles and different kinds of, combining different things. Sometimes the songs also are different. They can't really fit into an album. It wouldn't make so much sense.
Yeah.
So in that case, singles are amazing. But if there is a general theme, of course, albums are, the main thing, let's say.
Well,
But
I
in
love.
this period, especially, I will be releasing singles. That's what I can say, and then I will think of a new album.
Do you think the singles will become an EP, or they'll just be on their own?
Some singles might become an EP, but it depends on where they're going, kinda. If,
Hmm.
as I was saying, if they have
Different that they
some
don't go together.
similar moods, yeah. Yeah, this is
Yeah,
a period like that for me, yeah.
I do release tons of singles, and then a lot of them end up being what's gonna, be part of a bigger project, but a lot
Mhm,
of them are like, I end up doing things, and my songs are not typical. They're like, 6 to 8 minutes, so they're like
mhm.
3 songs in one.
Yeah.
So when I do my singles, it's like they're kinda like a project in themselves, because I come from this kind of progressive rock idea,
Uh-huh.
and so, like, if I will release a lot of them because some of them will be in different type of form. Some of them be more punk,
Yeah.
some be more new wave, some might
Mhm.
be more jazz, and so they don't fit. But sometimes, like, I like Prince's idea, like, sometimes you can have an EP that might have like fusion, it might have acoustic, it might have
Mhm.
funk, but maybe lyrically they're themed together. Maybe musically
Yeah,
they don't work together, but the idea in it might work. And so that's kind of a
exactly.
different way. Like you think about Sergeant Pepper's, it's not really a rock opera, but it has all these different types of psychedelic songs, and maybe there's no central theme, but they seem to all work, you know. And so
Yeah.
there's a way to build albums in that way. And I get really interested in that kind of structure. If you think about like, can you have like the theme of the content, not the music, and then you can then still do it as an album. And then
Mhm.
sometimes if it's too radical, then I'll just each one's on its own.
Yeah, it depends, as you were saying, also on the lyrics, also on the mood. It's maybe, yeah, the styles can be so different. Some songs might be acoustic, some might be, I don't know, pop, R&B. I'm talking for myself. But if many songs are super happy and really hopeful, and then the rest are about
More
something
dark.
completely, yeah, dark,
Yeah,
then
yeah.
no, I
Maybe it doesn't
prefer
go. Yeah,
singles. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because like it's hard to like like if you have to really think out the overall concept of the album. Because like if you have some albums that like, oh, you start in this place and you end up in another place. Right, so if you have
Exactly.
something like that, then maybe you could have a transition that goes
Hmm.
to different feelings, but
Yeah.
then, there are some people like, yeah, like, you trying to promote your thing is like, well, like, if you're in the like, in the dumps and kinda really depressed and you're doing all this stuff, and it's kinda like catharsis. Like, I think a lot of songwriters, you're right to kinda get out of a mood or because you're in the mood, right? And so, like,
Hmm.
you're broke up or you're feeling, like, down or something, you're upset about
Hmm.
the environment or you're whatever, and so you have this theme, and it's not, "Okay, well, that's kinda harsh," or "That's kinda, like, jarring," or "That's, like, wow." Um, like,
Yeah.
there was a guy, like, I was really into, like, Husker Du, like, Bob Mould, and when he would admit that he was, like, manic depressive sometimes, and sometimes he would do albums that were so dark. It was like, "Wow, that's so dark. I don't know if I can even listen to it all the time." But he this album kind of like Black Sheets of Rain about the environment, and it's very depressing. And it's like you can only listen to it like sometimes if you're kind of in the right frame of mind for it. And then like even his hardcore fans were like, well, that's a little too much, Bob. But it's like it's kind of like you don't know. It's like okay, the artist's gonna do what they feel like, right? And if they feel that they want to dedicate that piece of work to that, then that's what they do. It's kind of like I
Yeah.
think that you should kind of get it out of your system. Like if you, because otherwise, like where's it gonna go? I think a lot of us, at least I do. I use music to kind of get at like a catharsis, to kind of
Hmm.
move forward in my life, and I put it into my work.
Yeah. For example, my first album was actually my thesis project. My thesis project was about concept albums, so I made a whole research about it. And
Awesome.
then the album was kind of like a concept album because all the songs were somehow connected, if not by lyrics, by some sound effects, elements,
Mm,
anything. And so it worked great. And also, with these intros and outros, like I was saying before, it
yeah.
was
Oh,
kind of,
yeah.
yeah, like the old times, let's say, but in
Yeah.
a more pop way.
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
So, yeah,
a band like Yes, like I listened to an album like Close to the Edge, and it starts
yeah.
off with like a field recording in
Hmm.
the forest. They actually did a field recording in a forest and they get it. And they have all
Yeah.
Yes is famous for these big long intro, outros, changing keys,
Hmm.
changing rhythm,
Yeah.
basically sometimes having 3 or 4 songs strung together as one song. And
Hmm.
kinda like a jazz band going into a theme, and they'll have, like, this kinda chanting theme, and then go out of it and come back into it, and then
Yeah.
have these whole sections and, like, really cool vocal layering of the whole band vocalizing, and then maybe just the lead singer vocalizing, and then, just doing a lot of different things that a lot of bands would just do as one song, but they do as like they have all these ideas, you know, in this one song. I mean, it's different songs. They just combine them, and
Hmm.
I think that there's a place for that. Not that many. I mean, I think a band like Radiohead, a band like Magua, they still kind
Hmm.
of do this yes type of construction,
Yeah.
which is cool, and that's probably why I go to bands like Wilco, Radiohead, Magua, because they still write that way. I get drawn to anybody that goes in that
Yeah.
direction. So for live performance,
Yeah.
are you able to go out and play your piano in a live setting? Are you able to actually play anywhere right now?
Right now, I mean, it's been a long time because of the virus. I couldn't
Mhm.
do any concerts. That's what happened with my second album, which was called Moontide.
Mm.
Like, my plan was I released it, it was 2019, it was in fall. So I was planning on doing concerts for
Mm.
spring and summer. Everything canceled. So yeah, it's been in Italy right now. Things are starting to open up. Also, some smaller concerts, but still not so ideal, let's say.
Yeah,
So
the problem
yeah,
is
I've been missing live performances, but
the problem I've
we'll
seen
see.
is like a venue opens, but it's like half capacity, and
Hmm.
like it's hard as a live musician to make it on the margin anyway, because you
Hmm.
have to pay so many upfront costs to like get there and set up, and maybe have
Yeah,
to sleep over somewhere. And so if you got it where they can't pack the club, so you can't get the
yeah.
optimum, you know, profit. Like, not that we have to all make profit, but it's like you gotta break even.
Hmm.
It's difficult. Like I go to New York. Like I have to if I go to New York, I really need like a 300 seat club to actually have like 305 to make money. If I came in and it's gonna do like 150,
Hmm.
150 people in there, I'm probably not gonna make any money. It's not gonna justify me getting a van to drive down there and do it.
Yeah.
I
And
probably rather live stream than do that because I'm probably not gonna make any money on it. So, I mean, not that I don't go to New York sometimes for opportunities. I mean, I might go to New York and play so that the press might see me and write me
mhm.
up. And so I was like, okay, if I go and a DJ sees me or a radio guy sees me, I'll
Yeah.
I'll I'll, I'll take the hit just so
Uh-huh.
that the ghost gets known. But you have to do as you do as an artist. Sometimes I'll go somewhere just because I want to play, just because I like playing. Um, so
Yeah.
so I think like as musicians, people have to understand is like we typically do what we do because we love it. And a lot of times we don't get the money for it until like way in after we do it, you know. Um, and so I always encourage folks to like support the people you love. Go to their page and hit their hit their if they have crowdfunding, hit their crowdfunding, buy their merch,
Yeah.
buy the album. Don't just stream it. Go
Mhm.
to like Amazon and buy it. Go to
Yeah.
iTunes and like download, buy it. Um, Yeah, because it's like, I don't think people understand how much work goes into writing a song.
No,
How many
exactly.
hours.
They don't realize all the details. Sometimes even liking something is really important for
Yeah,
us
yeah.
artists, and people just
Oh,
don't,
yeah,
they don't even know about all the details. Or maybe when we release a song or something, they think that everything is automatic, it's so easy, but there's so many details behind. And
yeah,
to arrive to sharing the actual song, we have to, deal with a lot of details, which I enjoy a lot, but there are at least 50 steps to arrive to that day of the release. And
yeah. I mean,
yeah.
you have to do the video. You're usually paying out of your pocket for the video. You're paying, if you want to get it on vinyl or CD, you got to pay up front. There's so many upfront things you got to do. You got to license, you got to take care of your mastering. You got to take care of this. If you go to a studio, you got to pay the recording engineers and the producers. There's all this stuff
Hmm.
you got to do. And, I produce myself to avoid that.
Yeah,
But,
me too, most of the times. Yeah.
yeah, and I do a lot of stuff where I do mastering tools I have too. I don't have to pay for somebody to do it. But,
Hmm.
I understand recording engineers, it's an art, and I would love to support that art. But in this kind of
Yeah.
situation, I ended up having to learn more about it to do it
Mhm.
myself because if I want to put out the stuff I want to put out, like I would not be able to put out my content if I had to pay a recording engineer for every time I did what I do. Um,
Mhm.
so
Yeah,
so
I
I had
get it.
to I had to make a choice. But I think plus I kind of believe in this idea. If you listen to stuff like lo-fi stuff like the Velvet Underground, or you
Mhm.
listen to like stuff from like the idea of alternative music, college radio, bands like REM,
Mhm.
band, having that, not having perfect sound is not always a problem. I kind of liked like REM before they got on Warner Brothers, and they have a small label called RES, yeah,
Mhm.
IRS. There's a sound that where they didn't have as much money and they weren't recording on as good equipment, but the albums sound really good. In some cases, I think some of the albums are better than their better recorded stuff. So it's sometimes like the higher the quality of the recording doesn't necessarily translate that that's a better song.
No, no, exactly. Yeah. Mm.
I think some people today are such into like the DAW world that they're so into trying to get perfect sound. I think they have forgotten the part of the sound is the imperfection in the sound or the
Mhm.
happy accents in the sound can actually make it more beautiful than being totally perfect.
Exactly. Before I was more like a perfectionist, let's say, but especially in the last years, and also this year because of the virus, let's say, I've been recording things, but not only the instruments, but also the vocals at home.
Mhm.
And in my last releases, I noticed that they sounded really good and also sometimes even better because, sometimes even the sound of, taking a breath before starting to sing,
Yeah,
those small details, when they're there, they
yeah,
create more of a natural, more emotional performance. So, yeah,
yeah,
I
that's
totally
what I try
agree
to
with
point
that.
out point out to people if you go back and listen to, like, a Carpenter's record in the '70s, right? Or Carole
Mhm.
King, or you listen to, like, anything recorded in the '70s or the '60s, you will hear tape hiss, you will hear, cuts in the tape,
Yeah.
you'll hear, like, key changes, maybe they shouldn't be there, but there's something about it. You might hear somebody like Dylan's famous for sometimes, like, his jacket hitting his guitar. The buttons on his jacket kinda hit his guitar while he's
Yeah.
playing, and you can hear it. And some people today would EQ that out. But to
Yeah,
me, it's like,
exactly.
it's like, that's the kinda thing I'm talking about. It's like, there's nothing wrong with some things like that because that's, like, kinda more honest, right? And then it gives you, like, an ambiance to it that people don't realize is like, that is part of the character, like a painter.
Yeah.
I'm into the idea of like sound painting and
Mhm.
sometimes using a mic, they're not the best, like not some $10,000 mic, but like if you use a certain mic and maybe it's not the best mic in the world, but there's a way you use it
Mhm.
is very unique and it could actually, in some way, like looking at it from a very technical standpoint, like, oh, you shouldn't, like, no, it's like that actually sounds good. I've heard people use voice memos, and the voice memo actually sounds better than when they went on like a C414.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
so, like, I would use the voice memo better, even though you wouldn't spend money to get a C414, it's like the voice memo sounds better,
Yeah.
so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it's true. I totally agree. And that's what I've been trying to apply to my music in general. I sometimes also people maybe use that as an excuse. They say, okay, your microphone is not the best, so come to the studio, let's record it here, things like that.
Yeah,
And
well, that's how they
I've
make
been
money.
I've been recording things without any problems. Of course, I enjoy going to the studio so much, but it didn't stop me also this last year when everything was closed. So,
Yeah.
no,
Well, the
there's
one thing
always a solution, let's say, if you want to. Yeah.
what I like about the studio is if I'm there with, like, a live band, you know,
Hmm.
that's what I like about it. Like, if I do a studio, like, if you got the drummer, you got
Yeah.
everybody there, it's kinda you had an idea, and then you change the idea. If
Mm.
you have a really good producer and they say, "Hey, do this arrangement," or do then that's okay, that's valuable.
Yeah.
but it's like if it's just for the perfection of the studio, then I don't necessarily need that. But if it's
Uh-huh.
because of the collaboration or because they're gonna do something that I can't do, because
Mm-hmm.
like maybe they got a Moog Model 55 and I don't have it, or they
Yeah.
got a Hammond B3 and I don't have it, or they got some kind of like ability to like a sound capability that I don't have. So if they have
Mm-hmm.
sound capability I don't have and I can't replicate, okay,
Yeah.
fine, I can see why I want to do that. But other than that, you know, I like to do it at home anyway. To
Yeah,
just sit.
maybe for the piano, for example, they have an amazing piano, so it would be totally worth going
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
And
Somebody's got this German awesome grand piano or
hmm
like a really good Steinway or something. I'm like,
yeah.
oh, okay. Okay, I can see like for me, it's like I love Moogs. Like so somebody's got like a memory Moog and it works
hmm
because that's a very rare Moog. And I'm like, if that okay, fine. I maybe I'll go for that or like a Poly Moog, which was used like on cars, Gary Newman cars. This
hmm
famous Moog called Poly Moog, which is actually like it's like a divide down Hammond B3, but it's a Moog. It's a Moog synthesizer that's an organ and a synth at the same time. So
Uh-huh.
it can actually do chords that are like full polyphony. It actually plays like an organ. It's not like you play a synthesizer, it says, "Oh, I can do 24 notes or 256 notes," but it can't really do full polyphony, which is like what a natural organ does.
hmm
Polymoog, because it's built like an organ that happens to have Moog oscillators and filters on it, it's kind of this rare bird. It doesn't sound like anything else. So if you ever get next to one or on one, it can do really interesting chords. It has this sound that you can't really replicate. And so like if
Cool.
you ever get in front of one, it's like, oh, okay, I kind of like know what I want to do with it. But I'm kind of a synth head, so that I kind of go there. But yeah. So I think it's been cool to talk to you. And I know that we're probably hitting over now. So we'll kind of wind down. But are
Okay.
you planning on doing anything outside of Italy?
Like concerts
Yeah,
or
yeah, like going through Europe, and I don't know if that's gonna happen because of the way things are. But was there ever
yeah.
anything where you get invited to like a festival or do something like a tour
Um
outside, come to New York or do whatever, do anything like
yeah, I've had some invitations, but I couldn't do it one year, and the next year the virus hit.
that? Hmm.
So, but it's actually my dream also in the US or in the whole Europe. I've been doing concerts in Turkey and Italy,
Hmm.
but I would love to do, in other countries as well. I hope that after
New
this
York.
period,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'd love you to go to New York or Boston 'cause, like, I'm in the Northeast of the US, so, like, the places New York is the big one, Boston's, like, the other one. Um, Most people would probably go to New York rather than Boston, but Boston's cool. So, if there's a way to get to the US and you can't get to New York, maybe you can do a Boston club and you still end up viewing in the US. But,
Uh-huh.
yeah, that's actually
Oh, that
supposed to.
would be a dream. I visited New York and I really love it.
Yeah,
And yeah,
it's a
that
cool
would
city.
be.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to, cause like, that's where I go, cause like, where I live in New Hampshire, they're
Hmm
not into the type of music I do. So the only type of way I can actually get an audience is I have to go to Boston or New York or LA.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I don't wanna go all the way to LA unless I have to, but, do the Viper Room or something. But, yeah, I mean, not that I wouldn't do it, but to do the Viper Room is a big deal. So it's kinda like CBGBs or doing, any of the big clubs in New York. Yeah, but I think that's the dream of every musician is to hit like, go to London and play, Piccadilly Circus or something, play some big place, you know, and really kind of have a big happening. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's what I'm trying to do with this concert that you're checking out. We are doing just before we leave, we are doing this PEG concert kind of bedroom producer series in July 16th through the 18th, and we're inviting guests who have been on the show. We've invited you, um, and hopefully you'll be able to do it. You're checking it out. But yeah, what
Yeah.
the idea is that anybody who's been on the show has been interviewed is actually gonna be on this live podcast, or they're gonna actually have a videotape of their performance. Either way, we're going to be able to showcase 20, 30 minutes of each band over 3 days, and that's kind of cool. Gives people a place to play if you can't play anywhere.
No, I will happily be there. So yeah, it's a great opportunity and great event. So I will be happy to.
Yeah, we're hoping to do this like every year. Maybe because it's based on people being on the podcast. So every year we could do it, and then every year we have more people that we didn't have before.
Mhm.
And so it's an idea is that we'll have this continuing idea of creating a collective. Because the whole idea of this podcast is if people don't realize is like we've actually had guests who watch this show and then talk
Mhm.
to another artist and then go collaborate with that other artist.
Yeah,
And
that's a great idea.
an idea is like, okay, we're all musicians, we're all producers, like we're trying to showcase each other. And we
Mhm.
encourage like anybody who's been on PEG, who's been on the Family Like to Go show, you know, most artists I would agree and I think they would agree that they wouldn't mind being approached by anybody who's been on the show to kind of, ping them and say, hey, would you want to do something? Because
Mhm.
I talk to so many different types of artists that I think that's why I like to encourage like the cross collaboration because we have so many different genres that we talk
Yeah.
to. So we kind of create our own opportunity in our
Mhm.
own way to kind of push ourselves. If there's not places to play, then we'll make a place to play.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Well, thank you for being on the show. It's like we have your link up, and we will give you the link to the each one of these channels that's been playing this is going to have a permanent link. We will send you that right after. And this is actually going to be on our audio podcast partner. We work with Spotify through Anchor FM. We are actually part of that. And this will be on 11 podcast platforms that are audio only, including Spotify, Apple, Radio Public, Overcast, Stitcher, many, many more. So we will
Wow.
get you the first like audio ones as they start to convert. They'll be converting over the next like 2 days. But it'll be everywhere that we're on, and we're on like 11 platforms. So thank you for being on the show. We hope to have you on again, and we're going to see you on the 16th through the 18th of
Thanks
July.
for having me. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Have a good day
Thanks,
or
you too.
nighttime. Maybe it's nighttime.
Evening, let's.
Yeah. Goodbye.
Bye. Thanks.